here's the thing about this episode I'm excited for. So the last episode we released was The Zone of Interest with Amy Henserling as our guest, and not a movie that felt like we should put like a pop song at the end in the outro, even though I thought of a really funny one that Mark wouldn't let me use.
I thought of a funny one too. What was yours?
Well, mine wasn't about the Holocaust. Mine was about Amy, since our guest was Amy.
What was the song?
The Britney Spears song, If You Seek Amy. You know that song?
Man, you're deep lore. No.
I did not know that song actually.
You didn't know that song? That was like
No.
that was like a minor Britney hit.
I don't know
The
that
thing
song.
is, there's a Britney Spears album called In the Zone also.
Oh, there's so much connective tissue there. We should have done that.
Oh, see, I was gonna say our house is a very, very, very fine house with wood dripping. You know the Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young.
Oh, that's not a bad idea.
Oh, we should have involved Seth in that discussion.
I almost put it in my Instagram story, but then I felt like it was too edgy.
Yeah, it's a little flippant.
It is.
But then Jonathan Glazer did sing it in his acceptance speech, so that kind of
and then drop the mic.
Yeah, that's what everyone was upset about, right? With his speech.
Keep Crosby's name out your fucking mouth.
Hello and welcome to Unwatchables. It was the best of films, it was the worst of films, it was the age of fun, and the age of just gross. I am Marc Dottavio.
And I'm John Malkovich.
And today we're discussing a film so controversial it's never actually been released. In 2017, comedian Louis C.K. wrote, directed, and starred in I Love You, Daddy, which was pulled just a week before release after a New York Times article detailed his sexual misconduct. As if the timing wasn't bad enough, the film itself concerns a director known for his own sexual indiscretions with minors. Despite stars like John Malkovich and Chloe Grace Moretz, it's still only available on bootleg screener copies, and we got one. So let's see what all the fuss is about, Daddy.
Who do we credit as our source in the black market that gave us this unmarked disc?
I'm just going to say a man with an eye patch and a parrot on his shoulder got it for me.
It was Chris Pratt. We got this from Chris Pratt.
He was like, it's really not that bad. I don't know what everybody's on about, but it's really not that bad, dude. It's really funny.
Cancel culture.
Yeah. Jurassic World.
It's actually not hard to find this movie. I mean, if you use a torrent site and maybe if you even just do a Google search, I'm not sure. It's out there, so it can be found. It's not in high def or anything, but it didn't look terrible.
I was surprised that so Louis bought the distribution rights for this movie back from the company that was originally set to distribute it. And so I was kind of surprised that it was not available on his website like everything else he puts out himself is.
I think even he must have realized that the optics are never going to be good for this movie.
Yeah. He just did not finish it. It still just doesn't feel finished, even if you are totally on board with everything that's going on. I feel like it still has this, like anybody would say, let's edit this a little bit. Let's cut out a second here, 10 seconds there,
I totally agree. And I mean, we'll get more into that later, I guess, but it did occur to me while we were watching it, like, are we seeing a totally finished product? But if this was a screener that they made and this was going to have a theatrical release a week before they decided to pull it, that it makes me think that this really was how it was going to come out. I mean, it had the music and everything, and I don't know if it's in black and white, but there's some sort of color timing, I'm sure, involved with that I want to give him the benefit of the doubt, maybe, that it would look better if they had a chance to do more stuff to it. But I think it's safe to assume we saw like what would have come out in theaters.
I think this is probably what he wanted. Yeah.
Well, what we should give him credit for, and maybe this is why, to Mark's point, that he hasn't released it himself. I don't know, did you guys watch Louis, his show that was on FX years ago?
only a couple episodes in the background, real stoned at people's houses. So no.
I
Yeah,
think if unless I'm misremembering, I think he edited that show himself.
Yeah, I
yeah,
think
he
I've
did
heard that too.
everything.
And
Mm-hmm.
and that was kind of one of the show's strong points in my opinion. And so yeah, maybe he's just been busy with other stuff and hasn't gotten around to editing. I love you, Daddy.
Well, he's
Editing his
made a
first feature film. I don't know. That is the thing about this. This is his first like attempt at becoming a serious filmmaker, which is
Seth,
what it feels like.
I won't tolerate Pootie Tang erasure on this podcast.
yeah.
I do hear that Pootie Tang is cool. I have not seen it.
This is his third feature film technically. So I wasn't aware that in 1998 he made a very like small self-released feature film called Tomorrow Night, and it's got a lot of his comedian friends just kind of popping up, I guess, in it. I didn't watch it, but apparently
Okay.
Steve Carell and JB Smoove and Amy Poehler and Conan O'Brien like pop up and make appearances throughout. So, and I know just from listening to interviews with him and stuff that he's been into filmmaking like for a long time. Like he's made a lot of short films. He's always been really interested in making movies. So somehow he ends up directing Pootie Tang in 2001, which no
Mm-hmm.
one's seen that. Has anyone? Have you seen?
I have
I saw
not.
Pootie Tang.
I hear it's kind
I
of
saw
fun.
I saw Pootie Tang not long after it came out. It was probably 2003 or 4 when I saw it with some of my degenerate friends at the time.
Yeah, I've never checked that out. I know it's kind of a cult film now, the way that all weird movies that bombed like are
Yeah.
from 2001, but apparently he was like kind of fired effectively during the editing process, and however that movie turned out was not his vision. So
Okay.
it is a misbegotten project from like everybody's perspective, I guess. So in a way, Seth, you're kind of right that this is like his big, in a way, this is his debut. Like it definitely seems like he's really trying to make a real movie here and come out as
Right.
a writer director.
I mean, even his character in the movie has that aspect to him where he's a big deal. He's made big deal TV shows, but really his heart is in movie making, and he wants to make something real. He wants to be like a real artist at like, and he that's why he's so flabbergasted when he meets his hero John Malkovich in this movie, who is basically in more ways than one sort of a Woody Allen analog of some kind. But I don't know. Should we give any more background with like Louis? Did you guys get into Louis before everything hit the fan? I I like I liked whatever I saw. I just have never been a TV person, and I just happened to miss it. It's not like I saw his bad stuff coming or something like that. I just kind of missed it a little bit.
Yeah, man. I mean, so far we've just talked about like his the movie he's been behind, but I mean, I remember seeing I think his first special that really caught on fire. Was Shameless. Was
That
that the
sounds right.
first one?
Yeah.
And I remember like my freshman year of college seeing it on Comedy Central late at night, having no idea who he was, and I was like mesmerized by it. So, I mean, there was no bigger Louis C.K. stand-up fan than me, and I think you too, Tony, probably, right?
Definitely. He was like a YouTube guy to me is how I started seeing that, and I'm sure Mark was involved in getting me into Louis, but I mean, yeah, up until the happenings, I was probably up on virtually every Louis project, even his weird attempt at doing like a traditional sitcom. Uh,
Oh, Lucky
but the
Louie.
yeah, Lucky Louie. But the stand up specials, I was every single one of them. I was right there and uh, loved them all, even until like some of the more recent ones. But
Yeah, I mean, I have never had such a love affair with a stand-up as I had with Louis C.K. at the time, and there's certain, I guess, looking back at them, there's certain things that have aged better than others, and I'm able to be a little more critical about certain things. But I mean, he's the only comedian that I ever paid to see live twice, actually. And Tony,
mhm.
you were at least one of those, weren't you? In Cleveland?
Yeah, we had tickets to see Louis live in Cleveland, and I think somebody that was supposed to go with us ended up not being able to go, and we sold the ticket outside the theater. to like some weird guy who was by himself, not realizing that we were going to have to sit next to the weird guy we sold the ticket to. And
Excellent.
one of my other than thinking that the show was absolutely incredible and he was hilarious and I was like laughing throughout, the guy we sold the ticket to like never laughed once. He was sitting next to me the
That's
whole
so
time.
scary.
Still, and that's how Tony met his husband.
Hmm. He just felt a hand on his knee.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
I mean,
mean, any of the stand-up that I've seen, even now, like it's undeniably pretty funny. A lot of it, like I think you can piece out every once in a while something that you can get rubbed the wrong way with, but kind of only in a hindsight sort of way, right? Where I mean, he's among so many comedians that like that's their bread and butter, and that's why we go to them, which is them going too far or like getting too dark or going to
mhm.
places we're not necessarily comfortable going to, but we're excited to go to. Which I would argue, as much as I do not like this movie, there are moments in this movie where there's that excitement, sort of. Even if it is some inappropriate, like we're getting to inappropriate subject matter, there's that excitement of like, whoa, Louis going somewhere, and we're like, we don't know where we're going to wind up. That is exciting. And I think that's what he always had, kind of.
Yeah, and his stand-up, I mean, he could always talk about things that you could say were for shock value or that were getting a little kind of nihilistic in a way, but it never seemed like it was cheap with him. It's always felt like he earned his way into doing that stuff, whether it was him being a little impish about it, like he knew that he was just kind of playing with ideas, whether it's about pedophilia or talking about his kids, like really sensitive stuff that you could tell he was coming from a place that wasn't just trying to shock you. He was actually kind of playing with it and having some fun just with the language and the absurdity of him being up there on stage talking about these things at all. And that's really hard for people to pull off. And it also might be kind of a sign of the times that it was easier to get away with stuff like that back then, even though I still think he's a pretty good example of that. I don't know. He doesn't seem like a snowflake challenging cancel culture complaining type guy. Like he never
No.
turned into Dave Chappelle or anything.
No, I never assume he's inching that way politically or anything, or even ideology. Like, I don't know. But obviously, what we're circling around is some rot at his core in some ways, or at least in his mode of expressing his sexuality towards women and his power towards women, um, which is obviously there, and that's what is always going to be in his shadow of all his work.
Well, yeah, and we should say it wasn't like just us at the time. By 2017, and maybe he had peaked a few years earlier. I mean, there was no more respected stand-up, I think, on the planet than he was. Like, as he had commercial success, but also he was the comedian that every comedian, like even the best ones, would point out as their favorite stand-up and kind of the gold standard. And he kind of
Mhm.
parlayed that from not just stand-up to, all right, I'm going to do this TV show where I'm going to write and direct and edit and produce and star in every single episode. And I'm not going to do it unless I have 100% creative control around it. And that's what he did for Louis. And that established a whole model, like a production model that other shows and comedians will kind of follow up on too.
Mhm.
And I don't know. I always felt that I enjoyed Louis for the most part, the show, but there was kind of a sense often that I wasn't into it as much as I wanted to. Like I actually never even watched the last couple seasons of it. I never watched Horace and Pete, the web series that he put out, because basically I never quite thought that his genius fully manifested outside of stand up, and the extent that it did was him being able to recapture that sensibility, which he was able to do sometimes on the show. But I know you were a big fan of that, right, Tony?
Of the show.
Yeah.
I was a big Louis fan. I felt like, I mean, the big divide between like Louis' stand up and Louis' like written work that he either turned in adapted for TV or movies, or I guess Horse and Pete was technically not even a TV show, but uh, I mean that thing that Seth was getting at, that you about, his kind of dark, shocking comedy. Like you said, Mark, he never played it like to like shock the audience and get like that kind of a reaction. What was always kind of his what he excelled at in his stand up was like taking the audience there with him in a way that like like he's taking these huge sold out theaters of people who maybe don't want to necessarily be laughing at these like jokes about like fucking dead kids or whatever, and he it's like it's a slow burn, like descent into this like horrible joke that you maybe don't want to laugh at, that he gets you to laugh at, and then in the show that doesn't translate the same way. It's a lot of what I like about it is that it's a lot of the same kind of like, it's not like a rapid fire like punchline after punchline. It's usually like a really kind of like slow setup to something that's like you kind of subtly figure out what's funny about, and it works really well in Louis for to a point, and and there's other things about it where it's kind of like you can always hear his voice in every character, like what they're saying, like there's never any like ambiguity about the like what the Louis perspective is, and there's, that can work really well for some things and be kind of flat on others. So yeah, generally I would say I'm very pro Louis and kind of pro Horace and Pete. I don't think I've finished that, but what I've seen of it had some really funny stuff in it. But yeah, there's nothing that I've seen so far of his, especially including this movie, that hits like his stand up does. But Louis is maybe the best example.
And it seems like this movie, I Love You Daddy, is sort of the crest of the wave, which is like this trajectory that it seems like, whether it's appropriate or not, almost all successful comedians have to go through this gauntlet of, they start as really funny comedians. They're doing the comedian thing in front of people, and then Jim Carrey gets movie deals, and he's like he's trying that out, and then he wants to push himself. He's got, or Robin Williams or any of these guys, Woody Allen, is going to come up a ton when we talk about Louis and this movie for various reasons. That's also a trajectory like that, where it eventually gets to this point where they they want to test the waters more and more to see how deep it all goes, if they can be dramatic. It seems like this is definitely him dipping into a more like, let's get serious, let's get emotional, let's get real kind of thing.
Yeah, and he tried all that stuff out in Louis because it was not like a plot driven show. He would have different actors play his family at different times. He would have a dramatic episode, he would have a surrealist episode. There was lots of absurdism going on. It felt more experimental, like he was just messing around with stuff a lot of the time. It wasn't
Mm-hmm.
until like a couple seasons in, I think he even had like an extended story arc
Mm-hmm.
happen in it. So that kind of gave him some leeway, but at the same time he starts showing up as an actor, which is a whole other thing, because he had like a recurring role in Parks and Rec. He was in American Hustle, which I totally forgot about. I think he's like
Right.
an FBI agent or something. And I think most consequentially was him churning up in an actual Woody Allen movie, which was Blue Jasmine. And I have to say, if I was kind of indulgent with his filmmaking experiments, I never thought that he became more than a just barely adequate actor. And I mean, there were times where he was actually kind of actively bad, I thought. So he did get to at least a point where he could be in something. But I mean, I remember like in Blue Jasmine thinking like, man, this guy is just not an actor.
Yeah, I mean, he's actively bad in this movie for sure at certain points.
The best thing I've probably seen him in was his role in Parks and Rec was pretty funny, and it
Mhm.
was really just him having an opportunity to play like a character that he might like describe running into in like one of his stand up bits or something. It was a pretty
Yeah. And I really think like generations of stand-up comedians there had the dream of doing Woody Allen's exact trajectories, like doing stand-up, then making funny films, and then starting to to do this thing where they keep returning playing a type, at being able to act basically
Mhm.
as themselves throughout each movie, but still tell these different stories and be able to, work with great cinematographers and have this emotional core to it. And honestly, I'm not sure anyone's really pulled that off since Woody Allen. I mean, people might look at Albert Brooks, who was around the same time, as doing another thing that they would aspire to do. His movies never got
Definitely not
really
a
serious.
comedian becoming a filmmaker that is actually successful. Yeah. That
Yeah,
is
and
kind
Woody
of.
Allen stopped doing stand up completely, which Louis C.K. was, I don't know, more of this breed that was always going to be his main thing.
Mhm.
And it just, that whole model has changed so much throughout over the years, where it used to be you do stand up and then you get a spot on the Tonight Show and then you get a production deal for making a sitcom and then you end up doing Seinfeld or any of the hundreds of shows like there. Everybody Loves Raymond. But all those guys still do stand up now, and I don't think the market is quite like it used to be, with that being the goal. Like every comedian probably isn't always just looking for a sitcom now.
Now the money's in podcasting, as we
Yeah.
know.
Yep, us and Joe Rogan.
Yeah, if you're not watching the YouTube video, I'm rolling in a bunch of $500 bills.
Yeah. We can tell there's nothing on the other side of those bills.
It's
But
all hollow.
anyways, this is all just to say he was at such a high level of esteem that it really was like the last person you could imagine being completely wiped out from that position. Because he also seemed like a nice, sensitive, thoughtful guy. Except there were always these rumors, I guess, that he did a pretty good job of suppressing for a while, basically like jerking off in front of women and technically asking for their permission, but he's still that guy that it's like he's like the boss at work coming to the new employees and being like, hey, you guys okay if I do this in front of you, and putting them on the spot, and like clearly that's not okay. Just because you like asking that question in these contexts at the very least is an abuse of power.
Oh,
Yeah,
absolutely.
and as far as like I guess because that's the whole pivot of this entire arc here is as far as the Louis C.K. Me Too moment, which we should point out came kind of at like the height of that. Like that was when the hashtag was like actually out there in use, and it wasn't just sort of like a this cultural thing that now we take for granted and just refer to all the time. But it was early. It was not long after the Harvey Weinstein expose and a couple of the other high profile ones, and whatever sort of excuse Louis tried to wrangle out of his technically having their consent at the time, even if that was kind of dubious because of his position of power relative to what these women who were trying to work in the comedy world were doing. He also was accused of a pretty like serious sort of stalking slash intimidation campaign to keep these women from getting this out there and sort of killing their careers either directly maybe or just by virtue of them not being able to wanting to confront this stuff to keep working in this industry. And so
Which was
uh
very typical behavior. That was how all these guys handled that stuff back then. That was finally starting to get blown up at this time.
yeah, and Louis laid low enough for a while. For a number of years you didn't really hear from him at all. He started to pop back up in small comedy clubs, doing sets, trying new stuff out, and eventually made some jokes about this whole incident that didn't address any of that stuff, but just took the part that everybody took the most salacious part about the
Mm.
jerking off in front of women and made some jokes out of that kind of at the time I think everyone cringed a little bit at, even if they were technically funny jokes, but maybe kind of he predicted this sort of backlash to the Me Too movement, or at least the sort of like everyone getting so overwhelmed by all the uh, you know left and right uh, allegations coming out about people all across the entertainment industry that you just don't hear about it as much as you did at the time. And you could argue that he sort of survived that um, ordeal in the sense that he's out there doing comedy again, but this movie certainly did not survive. Go.
Oh, what the hell was the last thing?
Pulling out his penis, and jacking off in front of women, and abusing his power.
I
Make
was
a note of
talking
that
about
for the
his sort of like,
soundboard.
I was
Yeah.
talking about him basically like waiting it out and returning to comedy, but this movie kind of
Yeah.
being the biggest casualty for him career wise, probably.
Unless
Yeah.
anybody, unless you're one of those people who still believes that cancel culture is a thing, he's still selling out Madison Square Garden. He won a Grammy for Best Comedy Album, like just within
He
the last
did.
couple years. So he's doing fine. And he did make another movie. I saw him advertising on his website called 4th of July, which I know nothing about. But so he's making movies, he's doing stand up. Audiences are still allowed to go and watch and enjoy whoever they want to. I mean, I listened to the stand up specials that he put out since returning from his self imposed um, hiatus. And I remember it was 2020, so it was like right after everything shut down after COVID. And it was a very, I mean, for me, just like freaky and like fragile and strange time. And then getting that email that he had a special out after like years of not hearing from him
God.
was like this strange comfort of like, you know what, I want to check in and see what's up with this. And it was this really bizarre, like warm blanket to me at the time, hearing it.
That's why you're on this podcast.
Yeah. But that's
You
a whole
devil,
other
you.
topic of how you handle stuff like that, because I mean, I think there's a big difference, right? Like if you're like, is there any good of not going back and watching Rosemary's Baby or pretending like it's not a great film? I don't think that does any good. But if you want to say like, but now in 2024, people who are deciding to work with Roman Polanski and the people who are distributing his works, that kind of makes you look askance.
Yeah,
So
fuck them. Yeah, fuck
we're
those people.
so it's like we're all drawing our own lines in all different parts of our life and these kind of things every day. It's never going to be perfect. And I don't have a good answer for that.
No, and yeah, I mean, I wouldn't really put anyone down for like following Louis' stand up as long as they like ideally they understand the bad parts of him. I wouldn't put anybody down for watching Rosemary's Baby and thinking it's a great movie because it is. But I also wouldn't
Or
put
Woody
anyone
Allen
down for
movies.
yeah, but I also wouldn't put anyone down for being like, you know what? I have like maybe just because of just the feeling you get from that,
Mhm.
it's not worth you watching Manhattan. Like, I don't really give a shit. I'm not going to be like, you're totally missing an experience, or something like. And not in the face of your actual discomfort, which I think it is for some people, especially women or people who have been affected by these things. Yeah, I would never be like, but you'll miss out on a movie, like, yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, everyone has to make their own decision for that, and I think it's fine however you want to go.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Good night, everyone. All right, so we sat down and we watched I Love You, Daddy, which again premiered in 2017 and at the Toronto Film Festival. And I think that might have been the only screening it had before it was supposed to be released by some company called The Orchard that picked it up. And this was a totally top secret project. Nobody knew that he was making a movie or that John Malkovich or any of these people were involved until
Also
they
weird.
came out and
Why?
premiered it.
Why secret? I don't get it really.
I don't know. Around that time, maybe there was just a lot of people. For a while there, Beyonce was always releasing an album, as a surprise that no one even knew she was working on.
Oh, I
Or
guess so. Yeah.
Radiohead did their Surprise and Rainbows release. That was a little earlier, but I don't know. It was like a
Also,
thing to keep things secret and then spring it.
with something like this too, probably getting out in front of the gossip. There's probably something about it. Even like regardless of gossip about his personal life, but gossip about Louis C.K. is making a child molester movie, kind of thing. Probably doesn't want that kind of buzz.
Well, no, that's certainly what it got at the time, at least once everything came out. I mean, I'm not sure exactly when this movie was shot, but you could plausibly say this was like the last pre-Me Too movie, like down to the second.
It sure as
Before
hell
Literally,
it came
feels
out.
literally,
like they are
yes.
getting their last little bits out before it's just not ever possible. Like,
Yeah, and it's funny too because watching this movie, I feel like it's a whole bunch of to do about nothing. Because even in the subject matter of it, I don't really feel like it ever goes anywhere that provocative with what's going on. And
no. No Todd
that,
Salons, which it almost feels like he's trying to get to a Salons level or something at a certain point in the movie, but it doesn't really go there.
no, it
And,
sets up what could have been a provocative premise here. And I
I mean, I'm
feel
not
like
mad, but
I should spend some time summarizing this since probably nobody listening to this has seen or will see this
or we'll
movie.
see, right?
I mean, I
But
assume a
basically,
lot of even big Louis heads probably don't even know this exists. There's probably a lot
Well,
of people that don't know this exists.
well, I mentioned this last night when we watched it, but I mean, I would consider myself, you know, in certainly in at this point as big a Louis head as there probably is out there, and I never would have watched this movie if it weren't for us having to do it for the podcast, and I watch pretty much everything he does. So
yeah.
you're
So we have Louis C.K. starring as some guy. I'm just going to call him Louis.
I knew he
Uh,
would.
who's a successful TV, I guess, writer, producer, and has a new show coming out. And there's some sort of going back and forth about him not feeling like it's his best work or kind of phoning it in, which is just one of a couple little subplots going on here that it can't really decide what the
He's
movie is
almost
trying to focus on.
humorously rich in the movie.
Yeah,
Like,
he is very
so
wealthy.
successful. Like, his apartment is like a castle inside of New York. Uh, and he has like a jet or something.
Yes, or he has time on the jet. He has like a card he can use
yeah.
to reserve the private jet. But basically, his 17-year-old daughter, who's played by Chloe Grace Moretz, who's been in all kinds of things. I remember her being a child star in Hugo. And what were the other big ones? She played Carrie in the Carrie remake. She's one of those people who's in all kinds of things. And so she plays his 17-year-old daughter, who's kind of spoiled, and he can't ever say no to her. And he eventually introduces her to this older director that he idolizes and is clearly based on Woody Allen, who is played by John Malkovich. And he has rumors that he has slept with a child and that he likes to hang around and watch young girls. And so Louis starts getting upset when his own daughter starts hanging out with him. And I mean, that's basically the setup there. And I feel like he sets that up, and then we just kind of go in circles for a long time, where now we spending time with Louis romancing this actress played by Rose Byrne, who he's having a relationship with, who wants to be in his new show. And we have him interacting with his what is she like someone who works for his production company played by Edie Falco, who's constantly yelling at him about um, not being ready to put out a new show.
There
Yeah,
are
like
layers
somebody
of
who would
women yelling at him in the
like a
movie. Yeah.
producer. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
That he just cannot please, and how could he ever figure them out? And.
And it even leaves kind of up in the air. It kind of wants to play this did he, didn't he? Like, did John Malkovich actually have sex with a minor? And he never really resolves that without it really seeming clear to me why he was trying to keep that all vague. And I don't know what. There's nothing worth getting worked up about on the story level for this, is there? It seems to me like he ends up landing the movie somewhere where it's more about his own uh, lack of artistic integrity with his new project. But we only ever really hear about that as opposed to see it happening.
No, we see none of that. And I mean, a big part of it is I don't know that it feels like this Louis character is like a schlub and he needs to learn a lesson, like in a lot of dramatic comedy movies. And he's like, he has a base assumption that needs to be challenged. But here, the base assumption that needs to be challenged is him saying, and it's played as a joke almost, where he says like, "Well, I can't let her have sex with an older man. She's a minor and 17." That's like a literal joke in this. Playing up the
Yeah.
fact that it's based on nothing and it's just a number or something. And he keeps on encountering these like borderline fairy godmother like women. They feel like they come down out of the sky to be like, well, you know what? I don't know what you're getting at, because when I was 14, I had sex with a 30-year-old man and it was a wonderful experience, and you can't call that rape. And how dare you call that rape, Louis? And he's like, "Oh, I never thought of it that way." And then he talks to another lady and she's like, "Well, you got to make a decision, let her do what she wants to do. She's a young woman now." And it's just one after the other, and you feel like, is that what this movie's about? Is Louis learning the lesson that for a second you think is the movie's truth, that it is seems to be peddling at least at a certain point, that it is correct, that it is something that is permissible, like, and obviously it doesn't get into enough nuance. It feels like it wants to be nuanced about something that is, of course, like, there's nothing magical about the age 18. We get it. There's nothing magical about it. It is societal norms and things like that. There are situations that have occurred plenty of times where this has been okay, quote unquote, according to the woman in the situation, that it was okay that they were in that situation as a teenager or something.
Your Honor.
But like,
and that's where
I know it feels like he's like pleading to a judge or something, that like, I swear there are examples, right? But like greater the greater thinking around it is correct, in my opinion, that no, I don't know, most of the time it's a good idea that we are pulling these things away.
and that's where I think there's a weakness in the perspective of Louis the writer is never hard to find, and it's rarely voiced by Louis the actor. Um, Louis the actor in this movie kind of just gets to be the sort of like morally outraged, upstanding, like pushing for what's right guy who doesn't want his 17-year-old daughter running off to Paris with this 60-some-year-old John Malkovich character. And
The worst you
I don't
could
know.
say is that he's a little, not even overprotective, more just like indulgent of her.
Right. He
He's
it starts
inactive.
with her getting back from spring break
He
and
coddles
wanting to
her.
go right back to Florida to hang out with her friends, and he can't say no to her, and there's a whole the Pamela Adlon character has this whole
Oh, I
which
forgot about
Pamela
her.
Adlon, she kind of always plays Louis' like kind of like raging conscience, or so he thinks. I think that's kind of the point. But she's yelling at him for what a bad dad he is because he can't say no, and your daughter wouldn't love you this much and be so affectionate if you were doing things right. You'd be more of a hard ass, and so there's like all this complicated stuff with like Louis, who is the I don't know, at the time he made this movie, I know he has a couple daughters in real life. They maybe were like around this age or something. um so it's hard to know where any of that stuff's coming from. But yeah, like to Seth's point, if there's like a point to be made, or like an interesting idea to dig into regarding, let's say, the Rose Byrne character, I can't think of her name in the movie, but who has this, kind of comes at Louis for his just outright assertion that, oh, if you had this experience with an older man when you were 15, well, I'm sorry, but you were raped. And she kind of throws this back at him like, how dare you? If maybe there's an idea there that's worth examining, it doesn't. Louis not the guy like to
Way over his head.
and yeah, and it doesn't. I don't know that he's strong enough as a writer to really give us anything in that exchange that isn't just kind of his own maybe doubts about the way most people in polite society kind of view these relationships, and that's a thread honestly through all of his non stand-up work. It's this happens a lot in Louis too, but that's definitely like sort of a, I think, a weakness of his writing, and like this a narrowness of his perspective that in his stand-up works because he takes this like self-deprecating angle from the get-go, and in this movie just kind of feels at best kind of like flat and uninteresting, and at worst like maybe a little grimy.
He clearly wants to write these complex characters and understand them and give them each their own agency and opinions, and almost to a fault, and he just can't do it. He's writing, he's taken on something that has taxed his abilities as a writer and filmmaker, which I just think based on this movie are just kind of bad. And I mean, I think it's obvious that we're all being pretty negative about this, but honestly, I thought I was kind of surprised by how kind of terrible I found the entire movie to be. I and especially on a, besides the fact that it can't decide what it's about, and I think it wants to be about all the things that it brings up but doesn't follow through with, and doesn't really know how to handle them. But just as a director, as a filmmaker, as an editor, it was like watching an early Kevin Smith movie or something.
That's a
And
good point.
part of me wonders how much was due to budget, because it is insane that he insisted on filming this in 35 millimeter black and white, which must have been so expensive. Like everybody by this point was shooting things in digital. And I wonder how much that explains a lot of this, that he probably didn't do a lot of takes for each scene, maybe only one, who knows. It feels like there's no coverage whatsoever. With, if you're not like a movie person, that just means like filming scenes a couple different times from different angles. So you have choices, and if something's not working, you can take things out and put things back in, and you can have more control over the pacing and finding like some sort of a rhythm for it. And there's so many scenes in this movie that are just him pointing and shooting, and with no options for him to cut things out. And there's one scene in particular between him and Rose Byrne where they're having that argument in the bedroom that I swear to God was one of the most like exasperating stretches of filmmaking I've ever had to sit through,
Oh my
where you
god,
could
yeah.
tell it goes on forever, and it's like they were filming a rehearsal or something. Like I can always tell when people are improvising in movies, almost always. And it's because they tend to repeat the same lines over and over again. Like you can actually feel them flailing around trying to figure out like which lines are the most significant and what's the emotional realization. And then they kind of back off from it because it's not working. And then they try something else. And then they take a pause that's way, way too long because they're thinking, oh, is this the profound moment? But then they're wrong. And it was excruciating.
You can
Like,
tell it's like an early it's an early experiment for Louis to, like, in his trajectory with improvisation. It seems like some of these scenes are very scripted, but other ones that are very big deal scenes, like the Rose Byrne one, and then the climactic scene with his daughter where they're having like a what the fuck's going on really
oh, that's
scene.
exactly the same way.
It's also the same way, and it's clearly like one take, because I mean, I listened to the whenever they released this, they did a Q&A with Louis and the cast at the festival that it was released at, and he does touch on that like he's trying to put a positive spin on it, but he is talking about how, like, well, it really lights a fire under your ass, and you've really got to get it
Yeah.
right fast, and oh man, we don't have enough tape to do another take of that. I guess we got to just roll with it. And it really does feel like that, because yeah, these scenes, like, he's really gambling trying to improv some of these things that are, again, just way above his pay grade, way above. He's asking a lot of sometimes very young actors to do very complicated things and express complicated things, like the daughter when she finally is confronting John Malkovich and maybe wanting to consummate their relationship and everything. That also feels like a similar scene, which is just a lot to ask a
Oh
young
man.
actress to like somehow sell this this really complicated, uncomfortable scene that Louis also doesn't really seem to know how to feel about.
Well, and
Exactly.
I think it's important to remember too that most of the filmed work of Louis that we've seen, he's just kind of hanging out with his comedian friends who he can lean on heavily to do that kind of improvisation and to let their voices kind of come through. And man, I do give credit to Chloe Grace Moretz and John Malkovich in this. They try to spark some life into this material, and there's some occasionally interesting stuff that I think they do in this. But yeah, it's too half-assed an idea from to begin with for them to really be able to save it.
And he never gets everybody on the same page as far as like the tone. So visually, we have something that's really trying to ape explicitly, I think, Manhattan, the Woody Allen film. That we
Black
have
and
it in
white.
black and white. We have this orchestral score going on over everything, lots of landscape shots, and then on we have Louis doing his normal like mumbly, sputtering kind of super low key, what he kind of probably feels is naturalistic acting. And then we have Pamela Adlon and Edie Falco and Charlie Day, who are so pitched like they're on a sitcom stage, like lots of yelling and gesturing. And the camera is always just kind of slightly moving to keep everyone in frame instead of establishing any kind of real like reality or tone or style. And then you have people like Chloe Grace Moretz and John Malkovich who are trying to like act, and none of it is seems like it's inhabiting the same movie.
No. Charlie
It,
Day, oh my god, he must have watched this at the end of it and been like, do you hate me? Why did you do this to me? It's one of the most insufferable, maybe the most insufferable performance I've ever seen in a movie. Especially when we're talking about, like, even without hindsight, but let's throw it in there. There's a scene where one of these long takes where it's a wide shot, and the lady that Louis been arguing with in the office, who's his like long-suffering associate woman, who's just like, oh, she's
Edie
so
Falco.
complicated and always
Yeah.
bothering me about the scheduling and stuff. And then we just have to sit there at a certain point, and it's played for laughs that Charlie Day is simulating jacking off in front of her, and
Yeah,
she's just
well, that's
clearly
actually.
disgusted and walks out.
Oh, yeah, that's true. That does happen a second time. There's an earlier scene where he's talking to Rose Byrne on the phone for the first time,
Oh
where
yeah.
he does the jacking off thing for the entire scene. Like it's quite prescient, you could you could say, but literally it's like this super long shot of him doing the fake jacking off, and it gets a little funny because he does do it for so long, and it's a wide angle, so it seems a little like cartoonish, but it's also a joke I've seen him do in his stand up.
Yeah, and in the context of the
Way
scene, it's just
funnier
mean
in the stand-up.
spirited towards Edie Falco. Yeah,
And and particularly I'm just gonna keep piling on here, I guess, but
I have
we
nice
have.
things to say whenever you're done, but
Okay,
yeah.
we'll get to those. We'll save a couple seconds at the end. But when John Malkovich and the daughter have these scenes together, I feel like those were entirely misconceived too, almost to where I could hear in the writing how he clearly wanted Woody Allen himself to play this role. And I forgot to bring this up because he did
Yeah.
actually offer this
He
role to
did.
Woody Allen.
No way.
I was
That's
gonna bring
so
this up if you didn't.
fucking
Yeah.
crazy.
Which must have been the easiest pass in cinema history for turning
Actually,
down a
no, I'm
role.
not gonna do that.
It actually like briefly changed my like attitude towards this project and its like intent to read that, because what a weird troll to just like to give this script to Woody Allen and then have him read it and be horrified and immediately turn it down, like with all the
Oh, for sure.
just that's kind of cool actually.
But I
Yeah.
could picture like a younger Woody Allen delivering some of those lines in a way that would have been somewhat alluring to
Hmm.
this young lady, because he does that in his own movies a lot. At least he used to, where you could actually see if you squinted why these young, attractive, sometimes smart women might be into him, because he seems worldly and funny and witty, even though he's
Hmm.
this little nebbish guy. And he does make it seem plausible in some of his movies that you could see why someone would be attracted to that. And John Malkovich plays it the exact opposite way. Like, he's
Mhm.
trying to be as weird and off-putting and slow and boorish as possible. And
Yes.
poor Chloe is sitting there like trying to act like she's being completely, mystified and seduced by him. And it just doesn't work. And again, I gotta, even though it's John Malkovich's delivery that is so like non charismatic and non alluring, still that's something that Louis, the director, allowed to happen and never got them either miscast it or never expressed to him that you need to do something to make it somewhat plausible. And then she also never really gets enough to be like, is this just a super vulnerable, lost girl? Is she acting out somehow against her dad? And the movie just never figures it out.
Right. I mean, I got to push back a little bit with John. I do have a little soft spot for John in this movie, I think. I don't I'm with you as far as him being miscast and not really playing it in a way that it feels as plausible as a Woody Allen or somebody, as being like, this is an older man that young ladies might get seduced by. John Malkovich is not sexy in this. He's wearing like weird outfits and stuff and
He looks like
being
an
weird
ogre.
and looking weird. uh I do think there is like it feels like it's in a different movie or something, like maybe just a weird remake of Lolita or something. But at least the initial talk at the party where Louis's daughter and him meet, I
Oh, and
feel
they're
like
talking
there's,
about feminism and stuff. That was better than the
yes,
later scenes.
I think
I'll take that.
there was something there that I was like, this is unexpected. And maybe it's just because it is, I mean, there is that kind of electricity there where there's like, oh, where this is naughty. We're going into a place we're not supposed to go. We're wondering what Louis is going to do with this. Obviously, what's disappointing is it comes to nothing and does nothing, and it's just going there to go there. But there is something to that scene, and even maybe the like really I mean, on paper, really it is stupid, the whole him just going to watch young girls go shopping or whatever scene, and she follows him around and stuff, and he's just like, well, I like young girls, who doesn't like young girls, and all of that. And it's just like, it was just, I like him so much as an actor that it did work in some sort of way, and at certain points he seemed charismatic. uh it is just more that it's just so strange, and you're pulled in for a second as to like, what what could be done with this? Where are we going? Like, I am like drawn in. I'm like watching intently, but it just comes to nothing. Yeah, it chucks itself into the trash can, especially by the end.
I
I
agree. It's
think
refreshing, especially when he first shows up, because you can at least tell, here's a good actor, like, who is comfortable in front of the camera, and he's not in a sitcom like
Seeing
Pamela
him in black
Adlon
and
and
white
Edie
is great.
Falco.
He looks great.
Yeah, he's not Louis C.K. I think him and Rose Byrne probably are the most like you can actually tell these are movie stars
Yeah,
who are
no, she's
comfortable in
great
front of the
too.
camera. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe if you want to take what maybe Louis intended, the his daughter's name is China in the movie, the Chloe Grace
That's
Moretz's
right.
character.
They
I
say it
think
a
if you
hundred
maybe
times.
Yeah, I think if you maybe want to take the sort of most optimistic reading of what that character is supposed to be, I don't know that it matters a ton that John Malkovich isn't super charismatic or charming or couldn't plausibly uh, seduce or just win over some girl this age. Uh, Putting that aside, like she just has this sort of really like kind of open, optimistic, looking for experiences, kind of unsure where she's headed in life, is the way the character is set up. And maybe she just finds his particular brand of sort of like
Mm,
confident old weird guy interesting enough for her to sort of make a um, have a little fascination with, but that's it. And ultimately, I think the movie tries to go that direction because so much of the Louis character arc is him being unable to comprehend how this is happening and what are the intentions of this old weird guy and with his young daughter, and he takes her off to France kind of against Louis's wishes. And I think ultimately where the character goes is she, in the end, we learn that she kind of has rejected John Malkovich's advances, and there's this scene that Seth was talking about where she's leaving her birthday party, like walking through the rain to get to his apartment, and she's like kind of like straddling him on the bed, and they're having this whole sort of flirty seeming back and forth. And there's this moment that like totally just like doesn't work at all the way Louis has written this. Again, it's just like Chloe's doing everything she can with this character, but Louis just not giving her anything to work with. But where there's this, it's almost too much setup to even talk about. But
It's
like, there's
basically
this,
her saying that she has is not has does not have like crazy sex with guys all the time.
yes,
That
like
she's
it's
and
always
so
implied, you
she's
know.
always the one not participating, even though that's only something that's ever wondered about her. Like it's a fear. It's not necessarily a. It doesn't feel like the big revelation to me. Like it clearly was supposed to be this earth-shattering scene.
Right. It also has to
exactly,
do with the
and
some game they talk about called Mother May I, which like there's an insistence about that game, and there's an insist. I don't know if it has anything to do with like Louis
I
thinks. I think on some level he's doing something with the daddy and the mommy and the daughter, like some Freudian thing is happening, and I don't think like one. I don't even want to start to think about those layers necessarily, and I don't think he's ready to either. But I don't know. Yeah.
well,
But
let's
anyway,
just finish that thought because that's a good way to get it. Like the point I think Louis is trying to make is so the what's his name Charlie Day puts the idea in Louis' head that he's heard of this game that the kids play on spring break called Mother May I, where all the girls line up naked on one side and the guys line up naked on the other side, and there's someone who in the middle who the guys ask permission to do something to the girls, and she makes them do something as punishment first, something gross with one of the guys or whatever it might be.
Then
So
they all
that's the setup
fuck.
for yeah, and then they all fuck. And so that's the setup for the game, and that's the idea that's in Louis' head, and he's uh, freaking out about his young innocent. He keeps calling her a minor daughter, involved in this kind of stuff, especially with this creepy old man. And then we learn later, after this game gets brought up multiple times, Chloe's character China brings it up to John Malkovich and is describing the game exactly the way it's described to us earlier in the movie. And the sort of twist that I think Louis thinks he's putting in there is that she says she always plays the mother, so she's not the one having the crazy silly sex, and she's basically Louis tries to write this character who is, despite his uh, view of her as this like young naive girl, like ripe to be taken advantage of, that she's actually much more sort of, she has her wits about her, and she's much more in control of her destiny than any of the adults in her life
ooh,
are giving her credit for. That's where
that's
Louis
that's
thinks
probably true
that's where
But
Louis
she
thinks
and
says
he's
it like
going in
shitty.
it's
this.
but she delivers it like it's this tragic thing that she um
Yeah.
like she delivers the line like it's a slam of the door, and then she wistfully like drifts away afterwards. I mean, the
Right,
scene just dies
because
there on
there's
the
like a
screen, but
disconnect. I think there's a disconnect between like how she feels about it, how Louis feels about it. I think Tony's right, probably following the logic of the movie at least, which you might have to do some math in order to like make it work like that. But I think
Yeah, I'm
Tony's
not saying it
right,
works. I'm just saying I know Louis well enough
and it's
to know
super
this is what
lame.
he's
Yeah.
trying to do, and it sucks and it's stupid, and it's the same perspective that we get from Rose Byrne's fight with him in that bedroom scene that Marc was talking about, and that's where he thinks it's going, and it just is not an interesting idea to begin with, and he's not the guy write it up, like we said, and that's my sort of like optimistic reading of where that character was supposed to be going. And kudos to Chloe for she was 20 years old when they shot this, and
Amazing.
barely older than the character that she's playing, and she tried her damnedest to make something out of that, and you get what you see.
And she had to deal with all the fallout with this. Oh my god, crazy.
Yeah. They made her
and
like
I do agree
for...
with what you're saying, Tony, as far as her through line of her character. I think it does work in a certain way for me, as far as she's just doing the things she thinks she needs to do, like most teenagers do, because they don't have, you still barely have your own personality. You're just like, well, I'm a society girl, so I shop here, and I'm 17, and so obviously I'll have an older man, and I don't even find him attractive necessarily, but there'll be an older man, and he'll take me to Paris because that's what sophisticated girls do. She's going through the motions in that way.
Yeah, the movie is so like won't commit to actually exploring the relationship between her and John Malkovich, so nothing really comes of it. You don't totally get where he's coming from or where she is coming from. Like, there's possibilities that are thrown out there, but that puts way too much weight just on the actor to try and make sense of it. And so we don't really get that, but we don't also either get a strong enough impression of how Louis his reaction to it seems pretty reasonable all the way throughout. So if he's supposed to have learned some lesson, it's not like he freaks out on her or anything. All he does is bring himself to ask John Malkovich if he is having sex with his daughter, to which he never gets an answer. And the way the movie's cagey about that too, about what they have actually done, and you never see him with anybody else or any evidence that he actually ever was with a minor, let alone with her.
Right.
It's all very first draft feeling to me. And maybe he's just a guy who he's so adamant about making his own show where he does absolutely everything, even if he's not very good at it, that he just wants to stay busy all the time. And he was just eager to get out and start working on this thing without having thought it through, which is kind of funny because the weaker Woody Allen movies have that same first draft, first take, let's all get home for dinner on time kind of feel to it.
We'll make another one next year.
Exactly. And actually, I mean, we can't really emphasize enough how much indebted this is to Woody Allen. So I was thinking throughout, like, okay, the ideal version of this movie in Louis' head probably would be that it came out a few decades before, and Woody Allen himself is in the Louis role. And I would see the director as more like maybe Alan Alda, like doing his Crimes and Misdemeanors thing.
Ooh. Which they literally have like a sit down that looks exactly like Crimes and Misdemeanors at the end of the movie, but they don't say shit.
Yeah, and the end of Crimes and Misdemeanors has Woody Allen realizing like how he's just totally ended up shit on. He lost the girl to the bad guy. He doesn't have his job anymore. The guy he was making a documentary about killed himself. Like, the whole point
which I guess is happening
movie,
here.
Exactly.
Louis has been shat upon. He's lost everything, almost in like a hyperbolic way, where he's like almost like purposefully hyperbolic to make it feel more like Crimes and Misdemeanors.
Yeah, and that conclusion makes sense in Crimes and Misdemeanors, like it actually was building there. That's like the whole point of the movie. Here it's like, wait, is this movie about how he lost his artistic integrity and has nothing now?
Right.
You're just telling me now this is what this movie's about?
The 17-year-old had nothing to do with it.
It ends with him going to the Emmys despite having no show that he's nominated for or anything. He failed to even release a show in the year that he's trying to write the show from the beginning. And John Malkovich has written a show and won seemingly multiple Emmys for it, taking the actor away, the Charlie Day character that Louis had worked with on his shows, and reveals to him that he was inspired to write for TV by reading Louis' shitty, uninspired script that he hands him in an earlier scene. And then at the end of it, just walks away from the table, and the joke is Louis like, "Oh, hey, you forgot your Emmy," and John Malkovich is like, "Oh, you can have it." And
now that actually was funny.
And of course, there's funny stuff throughout.
I laughed a couple times, maybe like 4.5 times. in the movie.
I like when
That's
John
so that
Malkovich is
actually,
talking about how he likes writing episodes. Oh, they have episodes in TV. Can anyone do a John Malkovich? I wish one.
I
It's
can't. No,
hard. He
I
has
would have
such a
needed
way of
time to
speaking, but it's
prepare.
like impossible to do it.
Louis does a halfway decent one in the movie, but yeah, I probably laughed the most of all of us, I think. But I 20% of that laughing was kind of like at like you know seeing what Louis fucking up at something pretty bad. But
Well, yeah, there's a lot of laughs of like I can't believe what I'm seeing. I can't believe I have no idea where this is going.
Yeah, I mean, any of this stuff that I really found funny were really just asides, that occasionally would land. But a lot of times the pacing was just so like sluggish throughout, and
Like
everything
boring.
so overextended that
Mhm.
there's no comic rhythm like or pacing to this movie at all,
Yeah, honestly, I feel like
and that would have helped.
even big fans of Louis, or even people that are curious about the like sort of antagonistic or controversial parts of this movie, the first 25 minutes are so fucking bland. I could see people turning it off. Like, at least at a certain point, you get to the party and John Malkovich is introduced, and then there's this whole, like, what's happening here element. But before that, it is dull, dull, dull. It's crazy how dull the movie is. And Louis himself, which we're like, that's like more than half the reason we're here. Louis is the most boring part. Like he
Mhm.
is just sitting in the corner, just kind of being like, just stupid lines floating out of him. Nothing funny. Like the whole thing is he's playing a straight man, which is like what a silly idea.
Well, yeah, and Charlie Day is such a like a prototypical
Oh,
loudmouth,
nails on a chalkboard.
foil, like exactly like every bad movie or rom-com has like the friend who's really loud and is like, yeah man, you just gotta get laid.
Yep.
And it's like that's what he's
Soundboard
putting
that,
in
Tony.
his classy ambitious comedy drama. uh so yeah, I liked it. I kind of liked it.
Yeah, I loved it actually.
I was pretty disappointed.
And the way it ends,
And the fact
too,
that
is
he
just
makes
such a
Charlie Day's character actually have a crazy arc at the end, just throw it at the wall arc that suddenly Charlie Day gets to be the one that gets to make stuff with John Malkovich, his hero. But Charlie Day is still just like,
And
yeah.
yeah, actually that was one of the funnier bits of the movie. I think is that
It's
Charlie
kind of
Day's
funny, but in
character.
the context of like an actual dramatic, realistic movie that it's trying to be or something, it's just preposterous and
I, I
crazy.
I did like him. He makes that joke to Louis early on that someone ought to confront John Malkovich about like, hey, did you actually fuck that kid? And he gets a chance to do it, and he does, and like John Malkovich is still like enough of a fan of his and is kind of taken with him that he keeps him around as like a that part I thought was kind of funny. But yeah, I we were annoyed with the Charlie Day performance at first, I think, but I ended up liking him a little more by the end. And again, another actor just putting his whole ass into this like kind of stupid underbaked thing, but
Yeah, I wasn't as down on him as Seth was. It was more the tonal disjunction, like he had no place being there,
Right.
or like being on that level, which I found to be the same with a couple other actors in there too. But just the fact that this was filmed just stubbornly in 35 millimeter for some reason,
yeah.
uh, just that it's like that, and occasionally the black and white looks pretty good, although it really seems sometimes like they just had it on like a high contrast preset. Like I'm not exactly sure how good the cinematography actually was, as well as much as it was just leaning into being shot on film stock in black and white. But there were some times where it could pass as something that actually looks good. Although even then, there were certain
Right.
scenes where like actors with like a darker skin tone would walk in and their face would like kind of disappear, like in the same shot as people with lighter skin tones. I don't know.
It's a hodgepodge, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Not prepared to do it. But I mean, it makes sense that he's going for the 35 millimeter because he's
Mhm.
going for it with this movie in several different ways. It's like this is and on a certain level, that's what gets me through the movie, is that kind of excitement about Louis trying to come out of his shell and come out of like metamorphosize, and then for a second you're kind of rooting him on or something. Like I appreciate him kind of going out on a limb and wanting to go head first into this more romantic mode, like the music and everything. He's trying to have a more romantic, openly sweet sometimes kind of demeanor to what he does.
It would have been a better, I don't know, first film in 1998. You know, if he had been able to make like 10 more
No, yeah.
afterwards and get a little more maybe money or resources or patience to work on something. I mean, maybe he could have gotten somewhere with that, but
No, yeah,
as
don't get me wrong. It's a poopy on the floor.
well put.
It is.
Yeah. And let's see, there is a couple, like, we do get the N word in this movie. We get multiple R words.
Oh my god, so many R
Lots of
words.
that,
It's
lots of
wild.
There's
And of course,
definitely
it's like everybody, like of various demographics, say it. It's like another layer of him having his like, well, people say this word isn't so bad, but why not say it? Everybody says it, you know.
which
This
could
hip
just
young chick says it
I
several
mean,
times.
it could be maybe recognizing that people do definitely still use the word, but uh, yeah, you can. That's definitely kind of his hallmark, and it's a very 2017 thing about this movie. This is
Mhm.
one of the
Yeah.
most 2017 movies, probably the most 2017 movie never to be released, at least.
Well, yeah, I mean, I love
But
what
there you go.
one of you said. I don't know who said it, but it does feel like it's down to the wire. Whether it's Louis knowing that he's about to get fucked by the things that he's done, or just literally him knowing that the world is changing as far as movies and content is changing, and it's like he's trying to get as much as he can into the last chance that he has at making a movie where the R word is there, and we like a man can do certain things with a 17-year-old and all these things. It's just like, and the clock strikes midnight and it's over.
Hey Seth,
Y-
I
Hey,
think
what's
there's a
up?
spider. I think there's a spider behind you on the wall.
Oh, it's one of those stupid stink bugs.
Oh, never mind.
I hate those guys.
Resume. You can leave the stink bug alone.
I'm not gonna.
And it is funny that this is so closely linked to Woody Allen when I think it was I'm trying to remember when Rainy Day in New York, which was Woody Allen's last cancellation film. It says it was completed in 2018, but Amazon Studios halted its release after the Me Too movement. So it was almost coincided with this that the two of them had movies that Rainy Day in New York, it did eventually come out, but it took a couple years and it looked like it might not ever. So these are always going to be tied together somehow. And not good for either of them.
Hmm.
Well, they can both run away to France and make movies there where there's just no rules about
There's no rules in France.
age and women and movies and anything.
Yeah, we were talking about this last night that Woody Allen's most recent movie is French language film with French actors and is some kind of a drama, which I assume means anytime he makes a full out drama, it ends up basically being the serious half of Crimes and Misdemeanors, and there's people arguing about if you have the right to kill somebody. So I can only assume that that's what this is about. But they're like, who knows?
The
That was
breadsticks.
my French accent.
Yeah, breadsticks.
Okay, we'll cut that out.
No, we can make fun of French people on this podcast. Fuck
I will,
French
to my
people.
last
They're a
dying
bunch
breath,
of
I will
white
mock the
people.
French.
Yeah, bunch of white people. They're fine.
Yeah, they're fine. So yeah, I wouldn't. This is really one that I guess I kind of would unwatch, if not just for
Boy.
now I've had the curiosity sated and it inspired a good discussion, but I think this is quite a poor film, and there's the thought of watching it again is quite mind numbing to me.
That sounds rough.
So
Tony,
yeah, I'll
Well,
unwatch it.
I used to not
that's a one
weigh in on this
watch.
part when
Yeah,
it was
sure.
just nice.
If it wasn't for this podcast, I mean, total waste of time.
Yeah.
I used to not weigh in on the watch unwatch when it was just the three of us, but now we've had so many guests that I don't even talk during that part. So I'll take this opportunity to log my first ever unwatch for this podcast. I don't think I needed to see this.
History.
I didn't really get as a huge fan of the guy. Even I don't think I got anything out of this. I don't think he should have made this. I don't think he should have released this when he did.
No.
And yeah, whatever, he's one of the all-time great stand-ups, and I think he maybe had a lot of unearned confidence going into this sort of film and TV career, just a mixed success. But yeah, this doesn't need to exist, and I don't need to have seen it.
Well put.
I
Although
think
it is,
go
go ahead.
Mark.
Just imagine this movie did come out and none of that stuff about Louis happened or was true, and it just came out. I I don't necessarily think it would have gotten him in much trouble because, like I said, I don't think this movie actually has it together enough to do anything that is
No.
incendiary or provocative like that. The worst thing would be, some of the maybe the subject matter. John
I
Malkovich not
mean,
being punished for being who he is could be maybe
yeah.
seen as something that wouldn't fly with some younger people. And you've got your R words and M words and everything.
Yes.
But
I would argue
really,
that some of that stuff would condemn this movie if it came out, regardless of the world loving Louis C.K. or not.
I don't
See,
know.
I
feel like
I
it
don't
just
think
would have.
there's
Nobody even would have noticed.
I
yeah,
don't know. I think it would. I think you're not allowed to. I don't think you're allowed to go there in the way that he did about the whole 17-year-old thing, and
see, but I
particularly,
don't think he went
I think it
there.
just would have been. I don't think it would have been like this movie is outlawed or something. I think it would have just gotten trashed to shit because of just the obvious. I mean, one of the major problems is not necessarily what Louis is saying. It's the fact that he's doing it in this such a transparent way through women characters that he's obviously writing their dialogue that are teaching him a lesson that he already knows, or whatever it is that is, I don't know, whatever this lesson is that he learns, which is that 17-year-olds should do whatever the hell they want
I
and he
think
should
you're
stop being such a pussy.
I think you're right that it would have gotten trashed, but I don't think there's anything that transgressive here. And I think, I
No, I
mean,
don't think
none of
so
us,
either. Yeah.
none of us are prudes. Like, I was open to this movie and knowing what its subject matter was. None of that was going to bother me. I just don't think Louis has the chops to do whatever he thought he was doing, and I think it would have just gotten trashed at least for that reason, because it's kind of a mess. But
Yeah,
I don't
I'm
know.
just
I
speaking for the
also
greater populace. I mean,
sure,
for
yeah,
me,
that's
no,
fair. It's
I am
icky.
not
It's an
watching this
icky.
and
It's
being
an icky
like,
movie.
oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, it's gross, but that's that's the most interesting thing about it.
it does seem like a movie that few
Honestly.
people would have probably ended up seeing in the long, in the greater scheme of things. Also, it's such a small kind of cheap, long, slow thing. Like it, maybe it would have played at some of the downtown art theaters, or
Yeah, it
it
wouldn't
would
have
show
earned a
up
big
streaming at some
distribution.
point. I do have a feeling though, like I never underestimate the kind of critical establishment's deference to somebody who is beloved like Louis C.K. was then, that they would have found positive things to say about it. Like I would not have been surprised at all if this would have come out normally and been warmly received generally by
Sure.
critics.
Hmm.
But then again, I think that happens to several movies every year that other people don't agree with. So
Well,
maybe
in the
that's just me.
universe where that happens, maybe Louis would have like finished the movie, and maybe some of that would have been more warranted.
True.
Yeah. I mean,
It's an
this might
unfinished,
be a
finished
window
film.
in. Yeah. I mean, this might be a window into like a lot of films that happen, which is the director puts out the Cannes cut of something and then everybody freaks out. I'm not talking about Southland Tales because there's nothing wrong with Southland Tales, but it sounds like I'm talking about Southland Tales,
Almost
but
made it to the end.
I'm not. I'm talking about other hypothetical films that, they come out there and then there's a response, and whether the filmmaker likes it or not, they sort of feel like they must react, and they cut it down in a certain way, or they have somebody else cut it down, and which should have happened to this and might have happened to this. It might have made for a better movie. I don't know how much of a better movie it would be, because I think it's just, it doesn't have the thing. It doesn't have the thing to give us that it claims to. And I'm right there with you guys as far as I'm watching this movie. I gotta say, as much as I maybe it was because my expectations were so low that the fact that the John Malkovich aspect of it, some of the will they won't they aspect of just like the charged Lolita whatnot going on, of just like, ooh, I'm watching something naughty here, I don't know where this is going, that did kind of excite me. And sometimes the black and white photography was interesting, but for the most part it flies out the window in the face of just it being incomplete. Yeah, this feels like first draft, like Marc said. This feels like someone showing me something and I'm like, all right, yeah, pretty good. I'll give you some notes though. Like, far from like, but you didn't tell me this was published and already out, and it's too late, like that's how this feels. And I'm just like, oh shit, what? Yeah, you just happened upon this thing in your hard drive called I Love You, Daddy.
Yeah, by the way, remind me to permanently delete this.
Yeah, we're
so
all
I
on a
don't have
list
that
for
on
this
there.
one. Oh my god.
Yeah. Well, good talk, boys. I think that maybe one
Oh
day...
yeah, do you think Louis wants to fuck his kids?
Oh no.
Cutting this part out, Seth.
Well, we don't want to unpack the Freudian level of this,
Nope.
I feel like Louis at certain points almost wants to, and it gets really awful and uncomfortable. I don't know what's happening with some of this.
We're gonna have to do a part 2 on this movie. I think we're gonna have to do 2 hours.
Let's recall that his crimes were against adult women,
adult comedians.
I don't know. I don't trust him.
Actually, you know what? Hot take here. Maybe we need fewer comedians. Maybe what he... No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. What he did was bad.
Now, if we had fewer comedians, the ones we have would be funnier, right? Is that how logic works?
I'm just saying crimes against comedians should count less than crimes against nice, normal, decent people.
Well put.
Also, you guys want to know something cool? It just occurred to me what song we're going to close this episode with.
Really? I thought of one too.
You guys can't hear it, but I can hear it in my head right now. It's just starting to swell over us talking. And it's just about to reach. Oh, it's good. It's going to be good.
Unwatchables is produced by Tony Scarpitti, hosted by me, Marc Dottavio, and Seth Troyer, with artwork by Micah Kraus. You can find Seth and I on Letterboxd under Marc Dottavio and Sloth Troyer. You can also check us out at unwatchablespod.com for links to our Twitter and Instagram, or support us on Patreon for bonus content and to have a say in what we watch. Thanks for listening.